All right. Welcome, one and all. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the Vampire Coast roster. So I'm going to do this in the style of the overviews I've done before. I may eventually do another overview for the Vampire Coast, but today I wanted to go over the roster, the abilities. We'll also touch on the lore of Deeps as well, the race-specific lore for the Vampire Coast, of course, and just in general have some fun. So let's switch things over. Welcome one and all. Decided to do this live as I've been streaming a whole bunch today, and yeah, just having some fun. Just past 5,000 subscribers, so first off, thank you to all you guys who have subscribed, been supporting me over the time that I've had my channel. It's grown a lot faster than I had anticipated, and truly, your guys' support means the world to me. It's really been beneficial for me in a lot of different ways. So thank you, and again, thank you. So now let's get to it. We're going to start off with the Legendary Lords here. I'm going to do this, go through the roster, talk about tactics a little bit, and then I'll field questions from you guys in the chat who have things you want to know. I can look at other factions as well afterwards, but I just wanted to kind of go through the roster here, talk about things, kind of my experiences so far. So, starting out with Legendary Lords, we're going to go with Aranessa Saltspite. Now, she's human. This is an undead army, first off, just to get that out of the way, but she is not undead, meaning she can't be healed by, for example, Invocation of Nehek. There are some other, key differences. She can actually rout, but just in terms of Aranessa herself, she's got armor piercing, anti-large, pretty decent combat stats actually, very good duelist, except for the fact she doesn't have a whole lot of armor and relatively low health as well. That being said, she does have a sweeping AoE attack that, from what I've heard, I haven't actually tested this out for myself, it's quite good against some single entity models. I'd be curious to see how much it does against like monsters and so on, for example, but yeah, she's definitely powerful. She does also have some physical resistance, charge defense against large, and of course she can take a crab mount, the Rotting Promethean. This is the, I say miniature, but they're still, larger than a horse-sized crab. This gives her significantly more armor, you can see. Actually only gives her a tiny bit more speed, like she's literally almost the same speed. She gets less melee attack, but the armor difference, and of course lots more health as well, does make her count as large. She does lose her physical resistance, but she gains 15% missile resistance, and yeah, also causes fear. Yep. So yeah, in terms of her abilities, she's got Manan's Luck to give herself more melee defense and damage resistance. Hornswaggle, this is one of the kind of army-wide abilities for the Vampire Coast. A lot of lords, not all, but most of the lords have access to this ability. Single target debuff to melee defense, armor, and speed. Going to be very useful in a multitude of situations, and unlike, for example, El Sif or Wolfric's single target debuff, this can be used on any target rather than just a character, so very powerful. Another army ability here is All Hands Way. This is kind of the stand your ground, if you will, for the Vampire Coast. Gives leadership and weapon damage and armor piercing damage. She's also got Spearfisher's Net. This is a hard snare in the same vein as Prey von Athrema. Also gives a melee defense debuff. Only lasts 18 seconds, so relatively short, but still a very powerful ability for this particular faction to have access to. And of course, Kraken's Bane. This is one of Aranessa's best attributes. She actually gives a passive AoE +5 melee attack and +8 bonus versus large. There aren't a whole lot of abilities in the game that can confer a bonus versus large, but this is one of the few, and the fact that it's a constant +8 in an area of effect, a pretty sizable area of effect as well. 40 meters is not a tiny pocket. That is going to be amazing, just absolutely amazing for a lot of different situations. So definitely look for Aranessa to be kind of your support lord. She's also pretty good in combat, one of the better duelists. Speaking of good in combat, the next one up on the list, also not a caster, Luther Harkon, probably the only vampire legendary lord in the game who's not a caster. That's because he is absolutely bonkers, but he is the anti-caster. He can't cast magic, sure, but he will massacre and shut down other casters. So that's kind of his gig. So just looking at him baseline, on foot he's got 90 armor, pretty solid, 80 leadership, 40 speeds, pretty quick on foot, 70 melee attack is pretty significant, and he also has this disrupted effect, a unique effect to Luther Harkon, plus 50% miscast chance and minus 10% physical resistance. Do note that resistances can go into the negative. The resistances are totaled up, and the minimum can be lower than 0. It's down to minus 100 actually, so will make physical attacks do a bit more damage, and of course gives a miscast chance, which again goes against casters. He's got pretty good melee defense, non-armor piercing weapon damage, quote unquote, has 170 AP with 310 regular weapon damage. Also has, of course, his missile attack. He's got a sword and pistol, so he's got armor piercing missile damage, a significant amount as well, a pretty short reload time. He can definitely dish out some shots, has a whole lot of ammo too, 50 shots, which is just a ton. Of course, he's got the Terrorgeist mount, which gives him a ton more health, makes him a large target, gives him terror. Note that this Terrorgeist does not have anti-large, does give him armor piercing in melee though, poison, although it does remove the disrupted in melee, meaning he can only confer that effect with his pistol. Important to note that there. Of course, gives him 90 speed, and this is one of the few units for the Vampire Coast, the Terrorgeist, that is actually pretty fast, can get around and definitely be very mobile. Of course, he can shoot down off the Terrorgeist, which makes him a little bit unique. Of course, it gives him that regeneration that the Terrorgeist has, and his other abilities here, he's got Hunger, so he will regenerate anyway in melee. He's got this here, which is Magical Void, gives 33% magic resistance to himself and all units in an area of effect, meaning that if you take him with ethereal units, he can actually give them some kind of damage mitigation, like, for example, these Sirens. Potentially you could take him, probably more on foot would be better, with a bunch of Sirens kind of protecting him, and they'd be somewhat protected against magical damage. How useful that actually is, I don't really know, but at the very least means that he's tough to like Spirit Leech down or Tempest down, for example, if he's up on the Terrorgeist. Definitely a very useful ability. He's also got Power Siphon, plus 15 recharge and minus 18% vigor, just to tire out an opposing Lord or Caster and to keep them from using their abilities. Note that this can be used on anyone, not just Lords or Casters, so you could even pop this on like a Sisters of Thorn, for example, to give them a bit more ability recharge, but generally you're going to be using this on your opponent's caster to prevent them from casting spells. Hornswaggle, again we've seen this, as well as All Hands Way. The item here he's got access to is Slon Gold. This greatly reduces your opponent's power recharge rate. Having had this used against me in a couple of battles, it essentially means that you can't regenerate your Winds of Magic while this is active, and it lasts for 55 seconds. It is devastating. Unlimited uses does have a pretty long cooldown time, but still, it just shuts down your magic super hard, and for magic-dependent armies, such as Vampire Counts, High Elves, Lizardmen, even Empire and Bretonnia to an extent, it will shut down those factions very hard. Chaos, making Harkon a viable pick in a lot of those matchups. And one of the most powerful characters. Granted, do note that he is insanely expensive as well. Moving on, we've got the Ghost Lady, Celestra Direfin, CA's original character, do not steal. She's got access to Lore of Deeps, and she's a ghost, so she's ethereal, got no armor, but she's got 75% physical resistance, causes fear and terror. And yeah, she's got, again, Lore of the Deeps, so I guess now would be a good time to touch on the Lore of the Deeps. Let's go ahead and open up our spell browser here. Alright, Spiteful Shot is a buff spell that's going to give your units 90 accuracy, which is pretty significant. It can make your hilariously inaccurate zombie gun units significantly more accurate. Also gives magic damage, so you can shoot at things with physical resistance much more effectively. And if you overcast it, just gives an additional duration, lasts for 54 seconds, which is a very long time for only 6 Winds of Magic. That is pretty effective. Tide Call is a breath spell similar to Curse the Midnight, or it's not Curse the Midnight Wind, Wind Blast. Doesn't do quite as much damage as Wind Blast, but it does give a minus 24% speed, good against unarmored targets or to help control the flow of the battle, no pun intended. You overcast it, just does more armor piercing damage. Fog of the Damned is a single target leadership and melee attack debuff. Sorry, it's not single target, looks like it's actually an area of effect. And yeah, can't target flying units for whatever reason, but a pretty good melee attack buff, or debuff rather. Melee attack buffs and debuffs are always useful, and if you overcast it, it has a pretty significant minus 44 melee attack, which is just massive. It could potentially be a really good debuff. I haven't really played around with this too much, but it might be potentially very useful. Denizens of the Deep, though, is absolutely very useful. You're able to summon some units of Rotting Prometheans. These are the mid-sized crabs, I guess is what you maybe would call them. But yeah, they do degrade, being a summoned unit, but still having that high mass summon is always useful. Kraken's Pull. This is, let's see here. This is sort of like Dwellers Below, if you will, kind of like a big stationary vortex. Does quite a bit of damage and can help slow units down in this area of effect. You can see these tentacles come up, a big flashy spell effect, as is typical for Lore of the Deeps. But yeah, sort of similar to Dwellers Below. Think of it sort of like in that way. Vangeist's Revenge is probably the flashiest spell of this lore. You guys can watch this animation play out in the background, but essentially you summon this giant ship and it shoots a broadside that acts more or less like a wind spell, does a ton of damage down that line, does have a pretty long spin up time, and that big flashy animation means it's also very easy to spot what's happening. But against some factions, this could be pretty good. Only 16 Winds of Magic for the regular one, 22 for Overcast. I'd be curious to see, I may test this later on versus Wind of Death to see which one does more damage straight up. I'm guessing Wind of Death does more damage, but still a very cool spell. So Celostra's got access to that lore. In terms of her other abilities, she's got, I guess I should touch on the lore attribute here. Kiss of the Deep gives a map-wide damage. I haven't tested out the amount of damage that it does. I imagine it's something like a Life Bloom, but in reverse. But yeah, every time you cast a spell, it will damage all your enemies map-wide. She also got Arcane Conduit, pretty good for a caster, of course. Song of Enthrallment, this is it affects enemies around her, gives minus 48% speed and 26 melee attack. So again, we come back to kind of controlling the pace of the battle and debuffing your opponent's combat stats. Ghosts of the Past is a unique ability for Celestra Direfin, and your only access to any kind of cavalry, traditional cavalry. As the Vampire Coast, she can summon 2 units of Knights Errant, ethereal, that is, Knights Errant. So very, very useful. I had this used against me just recently, actually today, by Tokshin in Turin's little invitational tournament, and he absolutely just ransacked my back line because I had thought in my mind, you know, oh, Vampire Coast doesn't have any heavy cavalry, I don't really need any fast movers to protect my back line, and I paid for it big time in that particular game. I'll be casting that at a later date, but yeah, super fun. And then the Bordeaux Flabellum is her item. It gives constant power recharge rate, just a bit additional power recharge rate for her, always nice. And let's see, every 15 seconds gives a minus 10 ability recharge. Wow, that's quite powerful. I mean, granted, she doesn't have the most powerful abilities that are super spammable, like this Ghost of the Past really only has 2 uses, but still, you could definitely get it out a lot faster with that item. Moving on, we're going to go through the generic lords now. So there are 2 generic lord variants, one with a polearm and one with pistol and sword, and both come in 3 different lore variants. We've got Lore of Vampires, Lore of Death, and Lore of Deeps. So Lore of Vampires you guys know and love from the good old Vampire Counts. Lore of Death is Lore of Death. I'm sure you're all familiar with it by this point. Lore of Deeps we've already talked about. In terms of these 2 characters themselves, obviously anti-large AP and no charge defense, interestingly enough, on the one with the polearm. Even on the crab, still does not have charge defense, which I think might be a little bit of a bug. I'm not sure. That may change on release. Just keep in mind this. A lot of this, especially specific stats, are subject to change before release. Things are pretty well tuned at this point, but I mean, obviously take this with a grain of salt. Things could potentially change before the actual release build, but anyway, in terms of their items and abilities, they've got the Hunger, Hornswaggle, and All Hands Way, so they'll regenerate in melee, and they've got the army abilities there. Van Horseman's Speculum for the polearm variant gives minus 27 melee attack, minus 26 melee attack, 27 melee defense, 25% weapon damage in area of effect around him for only 16 seconds, but still for only 97 gold. It's a pretty good item. Very nice little pocket debuff there. And Wand of Jet just gives additional power, reserves, and recharge rate at the cost of giving you a bit of ability recharge, especially in the late game when you're out of Winds of Magic and you can't really cast any spells anyway. Can be useful to get that Winds of Magic back. Let's see here. The pistol variant obviously doesn't have the armor-piercing anti-large and melee, but does have a missile armor-piercing missile attack. In terms of abilities here, pretty much the same thing, although for the items, they are different, and this is what I think makes the pistol variant just a little bit better than the halberd variant. This item right here, the Black Pirept, gives great increased power reserve and recharge rate. It's on a pretty long cooldown, but 30 seconds, and has no limit to its uses. So this item, in my opinion, is a lot better than the Wand of Jet. It gives you a lot more winds of magic, and it doesn't come at the cost of ability recharge. So I definitely think that this item makes the pistol variant a little bit better, especially because if you put the pistol variant on the Crab, she gets armor piercing as well. So I definitely think that the Vampiress Fleet Admiral is the better of the two variants. And out of the 3 spell variants, I would say Lore of Vampires is the one that you're going to want to go with most often. We all know and love this lore, but typically what I take just as a reminder, Invocation of Nehek, Dance Macabre, especially if you overcast it, is a melee attack and speed buff, both of which are very good for undead factions. And you also get the zombie summon as well. Rather than summoning regular zombies like the Vampire Counts would, you get to summon zombie deckhands, which are a little bit better. Not a whole lot, but you get less uses as a result. But yeah, that's the Fleet Admiral. Moving on to the final legendary lord, we've got Noctilus. Unmounted, he's got a halberd, charge defense against large, pretty decent combat stats. It's not the best attack in the world, but 110 armor, decent health. He's got a mix of vampires and shadows in terms of his lore. He's got Invocation of Nehek, Wind of Death. He's also got the Zombie Summon, the Drowned Dead, Melkos Mystifying Miasma, the Withering, and Pit of Shades. So definitely a very good anti-cav lord. Of course, with his mount, the Necrofex Colossus, he becomes just an absolute actual monster with a huge armor-piercing missile attack, armor-piercing in melee, although he already had that. He does lose his anti-large bonus, has worse combat stats, but gets way more health, like 3,000 more health. Does lose a little bit of armor. He's a bit quicker, though. And, of course, he causes fear and terror, acts as a siege breaker, and he gains this rule right here, Extra Powder, which good as opportunity as any to talk about this. This is the army-wide ability for, another army-wide ability, I should say, for the Vampire Coast. It gives extra missile damage, armor-piercing missile damage, explosion, armor-piercing explosion, etc. When your ammunition is above 80%. So when your ammo's full, you guys may have seen this, it almost looks like sparks, like flying off the unit's banner. That is this extra powder. That means that that's active. So when you're playing against the Vampire Coast, what that means is if you can bait out the initial few volleys without them doing too much damage, once they fall below that 80% threshold, they are going to lose a little bit, not a whole lot, but a little bit of their effectiveness of their missile damage. So that is going to play nicely into the next character. Just quickly finishing up with Noctilus, he's got this item here which allows him to summon more deckhand mobs but at a much greater range, and of course doesn't cost any winds of magic. Only got 2 charges though, still pretty powerful item. But moving on, back to the extra powder. Keeping the ammo high means that you need a way to replenish ammo, right? At least ideally. The Gunnery White allows you to do that. So this guy, excellent support hero. Unmounted, he's decent, lowish armor, as many Vampire Coast heroes do have. Not the best combat stats, but he's got a good armor-piercing missile attack. Put him on the Crab, though, and he gains many of the attributes of the Crab. Armor-piercing in melee. Let's see, his combat stats do go up, as well as, of course, his armor, health, just a lot of things across the board getting better. And, of course, the armor-piercing in melee and at range means he becomes a very good hybrid character. In terms of his abilities, he's got Dead Eyes. This is a constant area of effect buff for missile units. Bomb Throw. I haven't really used this too much myself, but it's a little explosion that he can do 4 times. He's basically got like grenades, essentially. Enhanced Ballistics. This is a plus 60% accuracy and 20 reload skill, which is pretty solid. Area of effect around him activatable lasts 25 seconds on a 90-second cooldown. Again, another support buff for missile units. This one here, though, more powder. So you get 3 charges of this. You target a single unit and you replenish some of their ammunition. I don't remember exactly what percentage you replenish, but you can get a unit back to this extra powder here if you put them back over that 80% threshold. So units that tend to run out of ammo or go through their ammo very quickly, like Noctilus if he's up on the Necrofex. Some other units that we'll get to later will benefit quite a bit from this as well. If you're playing campaign, I would always recommend you have a Gunnery White in the army where you have Queen Bess, because Queen Bess runs out of ammo pretty quickly, and this more powder will allow you to continuously replenish that ammunition, at least as long as you have charges of it. And yeah, very useful ability to have. It makes the Gunnery Wight very nice support character. Cackle Fruit is another grenade he has. Doesn't do as much damage, but does give a speed debuff. Can be useful, but I generally will cut the grenades just because I don't think they're wildly useful, and just take the support buff spells just to make them a little bit cheaper. He's also got Scab Scrath. This is an item from the Vampire Counts. Does a area of effect kind of breath spell. Decent. I've never found it to be wildly useful, so I don't usually take it, but he's also got Pigeon Plucker Pendant, so if you're worried about getting attacked by flyers, you can take this. It'll debuff their melee attack slightly. Kind of conditional, not really worth it in my opinion, but anyway, that's the Gunnery Wight. Moving on to the big spooky, the Mourngul Haunter. This guy's got Hunger, so he regenerates in melee once again. Foe Seeker and Deadly Onslaught. In terms of his stats, lowish armor, pretty decent health though, and obviously he counts as large. If you guys haven't seen this thing in battle yet, it is massive, just absolutely huge. Not the best combat stats actually, only 50 attack and 38 defense, but does have heavy armor piercing damage with a 25 bonus versus infantry, 40 charge bonus. It also has some good utility abilities, Fear and Terror, of course, always useful. Vanguard deployment and Stalk, which makes that just even that much more terrifying. Of course, Undead and all that. He's also got the Chilling Aura, so he'll give 36% speed debuff in an area of effect around him. Can be very useful for controlling kind of mobile units, or, you know, if a unit of infantry is trying to run away, then they're going to have a hard time, especially with that 54 speed. And yeah, that's the Haunter in a nutshell. It's got a couple items, Scarecrow, Banner, again, debuffs flying units. I'm not really sure why they have all these flying debuffs, but anyway, not super useful. Potion of Strength, though, definitely is useful. That 40% AP and weapon damage, only one-time use, but in the right situation can help him get some extra work done. Yeah, Mourngul Haunters, very powerful, very good in certain matchups like Dwarves and Skaven, for example. And then last, but certainly not least, we've got the Fleet Captain. So this is your hero level caster, basically the same thing as the Lord level caster, but slightly different. They've only got the Hunger and this Taunt. Taunt is basically like a lesser version of Hornswaggle, has the same effect, but it doesn't last as long. That being said, because they are different effects, you can stack them on top of each other, which is always fun. Give that minus 60 armor, you know, minus 50 something melee defense, and close to 50 speed as well, 48. You know, can potentially be very useful. Granted, again, this one only lasts 17 seconds, so it's not super devastating, but definitely good. Once again, we've got Vampire's Death and Deeps as before, and we've got the Power Stone and the Speed of Lycos. So the Speed of Lycos is a scroll, one-time use, gives 24% speed, stock, and unspottable. Can be useful in the right situation, like if you've got a Terrorgeist, for example, against a heavy missile faction, you pop that on them so they can't be seen. They also will fly towards your enemy faster, of course, so definitely can be useful in a multitude of situations. And the Power Stone, Winds of Magic Recharge, always useful. Now we're getting to the bread and butter. So zombies. Better than Vampire Count's zombies, but not as good as a lot of other things. They've got 120 unit models, relatively poor combat stats, okay weapon strength actually considering their cost, but mainly they're just your meat bags. They're literal meat shields. They do have aquatic. Most of the army has aquatic. I believe actually all of the army has aquatic. We'll check that in a minute, but yeah. They also come in a polearm variant, which these guys are actually super cost-effective in the right situation. They've got 20 melee defense, which is not terrible for a zombie. 13 bonus versus large with 19 armor-piercing damage means that if you juice them up with something like a Dance Macabre or, you know, something else, they can definitely get some work done. They're not going to, you know, win any beauty contest doing it, and they'll probably get cut through still, but yeah. You know, you add 26 melee attack on there, suddenly they go up to, what, like 40? And they become a little bit scary with that heavy armor-piercing weapon damage, especially because there's 120 of them. Granted, this is just something to note about all of the zombie units on this roster. They are hilariously slow at only 23 speed. It means you have to be on point with your positioning. If you screw it up, it can hurt you big time because it takes a long time to react. Going back to the dual swords version, we've got the Tide of Skilled, Regiment of Renown. This is a unit of zombies that has the Rowdy trait, which is hilarious. So they have perfect vigor as long as their leadership is high. They've also got Frenzy, which is, again, super interesting. Gives them actually really good combat stats for a unit of zombies. Decent weapon strength as well. So yeah, decent Regiment of Renown, especially considering how cheap they are. You might see these guys pretty often. I mean, they do have 8,000 HP, so they're definitely a meat bag. Moving on, there are basically no mid-tier infantry for the Vampire Coast, and their elite infantry is all very limited in number. Sirens, only 45 unit models. These guys are ethereal. These girls, I should say, I guess. 75% physical resistance, no armor, relatively low health, magic attacks, armor piercing, decent combat stats, though not too terrible for an ethereal unit. They also have this special effect here that is unique to them, this -9 melee attack charmed effect in melee. Yeah, very, very powerful for debuffing enemies, and if your opponent doesn't happen to bring magic damage, Sirens can be devastating. Or again, if you try and get some synergy with Harkon, get that magic resistance, maybe you're playing a 2v2 and you get a Rune Lord too just to get a lot of magic resistance. Maybe you make these guys work even in the face of magic damage. I don't know, just a bit of theory crafting, but a decent kind of niche unit. Definitely better in some matchups than others, but we'll see more of them later. Depth Guard come in 2 variants, plus a Regiment of Renown. They've got excellent combat stats. These guys are basically like Blood Knight Marines, is the way that I've described them. They've got only 45 unit models, relatively low health, but amazing combat stats, huge weapon strength, only 18 armor piercing for some reason for the dual axe variant, which I do find a little bit disappointing. It means they're actually not that great against armored infantry. But they do have Frenzy and the Hunger, so they'll regenerate hit points in melee. 100 armor, you know, excellent leadership. The Halberd variant trades out a bit of attack for defense. They also have less overall weapon strength, but obviously they have better AP values. 32 armor piercing is pretty solid with a 27 bonus versus large, which is huge, absolutely massive. And of course they've got Frenzy, the Hunger as well. These guys also gain charge defense against large, of course, because they have halberds. And yeah, the Regiment of Renown version picks up a few traits. They've got, well, they just get this, the Enrage. This is the same trait that I believe one of the Norskin Regiments of Renown has. Basically gives themselves 44% damage resistance for 22 seconds, which is incredibly powerful for a unit that's already super tanky with 67 melee defense. Granted, they don't have very many unit models, and they still have relatively low health, but these effects mean that they are definitely a lot tankier, certainly. Moving on to the fun part of the roster, zombies with guns. Yes, indeed. Let's get to it. First up, we've got zombies with pistols and swords. Pirate gunnery mobs. They've got better combat stats than the ones with handguns. They've got obviously shorter range and less missile damage. They don't do armor piercing. Decent ammunition, but they're zombies with pistols. I mean, they can fire while moving, but they can't fire in 360. Basically, they're undead free company, essentially. They also come in a bomber variant. These guys have only 3 bombs, relatively short range, and they have relatively poor combat stats as well. But the bombs do quite a bit of damage. They don't do the best AP, but they do have quite a bit of explosion damage, and they also do flaming attacks as well. You guys won't see these guys too much. Sometimes against like a low armor infantry rush faction, it might be useful to have 1 or 2 because they can throw over the heads of your own guys and kind of blow up the opponent's light infantry. But you're not going to see them as much as you would the other variants. The variant you're going to see the most often is the handgunner variant, the zombie pirate gunnery mob with handguns. Yes, these guys have excellent range, 120 unit models of armor piercing, missile damage. Terrible, just terrible combat stats, and they're super slow again, so you have to be careful with their positioning. But they do have a Regiment of Renown that's probably one of my favorite units on the roster. This unit has bayonets, essentially, so they've got much better combat stats. They have better weapon strength with armor piercing, anti-large, essentially giving them a halberd that also gives them charge defense against large. So yeah, they're a unit of handgunners that's not super vulnerable to cavalry. Again, these combat stats aren't great, but especially with a bonus versus large of 13, they can definitely do some damage to opposing heavy cavalry if they charge them, especially from the front. So very nice unit there. We've also got one more variant here, the hand cannons. I haven't used these guys too much myself. It seems like they might have some line of sight issues potentially, But yeah, I'll get back to you when I have more to say about these guys. I just really haven't used them too much. They have relatively limited range, and generally I've just found that the handgunner variant is going to be useful in most situations, so I haven't really found a reason to try these guys yet. So yeah, sorry I don't have a better opinion, but I'll get back to you on them. Deck gunners, though, are very useful in the right situation. These guys have pretty long range, 245, so they're kind of in between an artillery piece and a skirmisher, sort of like Ushabti great bows, if you will, or some of the shorter range artillery pieces, but they do a really good amount of armor-piercing missile damage with shield breaker, so they can negate your opponent's missile block chance, can get some good synergy there with some other units. The Regiment of Renown version does not have that effect. They do a little bit less missile damage, but they have Discourage, and they're ethereal, so again, that means no armor, but they've got physical resistance. Considering that zombies don't really have any armor anyway, I would say that's a definite benefit for them. And the unit already has very low health, so having even less health is an issue, but it's not that much of an issue. Of course, they do magic damage as well. Yeah, they're good against low leadership factions, certainly, because you already have the Fear and Terror. Usually, you'll have this Discourage, and you can stack some other effects, Doom and Darkness and so on, to really get some terror routes going. So these guys do have a little bit of a niche against like Skaven or Greenskins, for example. But yeah, moving on to monsters, we've got Fellbats and Direwolves. I mean Scurvy Dogs. I swear I didn't do that on purpose. These are basically the same as they are on the Vampire Counts roster, so I'm not really going to talk too much about them here. Bloated Corpse is your meme unit. If you guys want to get a meme replay, casted by me once the patch goes live, definitely use a Bloated Corpse, or two or more. It's a living bomb, basically. You run it in, it blows up, and it does a ton of damage in that area of effect, especially to like infantry and cavalry. I haven't really used it on like a single model to see how much damage it would do there, but probably not a unit you're going to see in multiplayer a lot, just because it's such a high risk reward. Campaign, though, it's certainly a fun unit to take. If I end up getting a multiplayer replay with these guys where they actually get some work done, I'll let you guys know. Moving on, we've got the Animated Hulks. These guys aren't super useful. They're kind of like Chaos Spawn, but they just really don't have that good of combat stats, although they do have armor-piercing damage, which Chaos Spawn don't, and they're cheaper and they're undead. But again, low armor, low melee defense. They don't have the greatest speed in the world. You're not going to see these guys too much. But potentially in a couple matchups they might be useful. Again, sort of like Chaos Spawn, they might be a bit niche, but we'll see. Morn Ghouls, on the other hand, are going to be useful in a multitude of matchups, at least the regular variant. They've got, again, like the Haunter, armor-piercing, anti-infantry. Not a lot of armor, but they do have heavy missile resistance. I don't know if I mentioned that with the Haunter, but he's got heavy missile resistance as well. So, they're somewhat resistant to missile fire. They still do have low armor, so it's not great. But, yeah, not the best combat stats, but the armor-piercing anti-infantry makes up for it. Decent charge bonus. They're relatively quick as well. 45 speed relative to the rest of the roster, that is. They've got the Hunger, so they'll regenerate in melee. And the Night Terrors, the Regiment of Renown version, just gain straight-up better stats across the board, even better weapon strength, more so than a regular Regiment of Renown would get. But it comes at a huge cost, and why you will probably never see these guys in multiplayer. They rampage. Yep, 1,200-point unit. That rampages. Nope. Moving on. We've got the Crabs. This is kind of the bread and butter monster that you're going to see mostly. The Crabs have charge defense against large, 120 armor, really excellent combat stats for monstrous infantry, as well as armor-piercing weapon strength, 22 charge bonus, although generally you're going to be wanting them taking the charge, or at least blocking up enemy heavy cavalry. Yeah, not the best leadership in the world, but 45 speed means they're faster than your zombies. Still not as fast as most heavy cavalry, in fact, all heavy cavalry. But yeah, they are very, very useful. Just super tanky. They give you that kind of tanky presence that you really lack otherwise, because, I mean, zombie pirates, they take a while to cut through, but they're really not tanky per se. Depth Guard can do a lot of damage, but they're too low in number to truly be tanky. Prometheans, though, with their armor, their good health pool, and everything, decent melee defense, they definitely fit that definition. So moving on, another excellent unit on the roster, we've got Deck Droppers, come in 3 variants with a Regiment of Renown version. So the one you're probably going to see the most often is the handgun variant. They also come in a pistol variant that has less range and less missile damage, and a bomber variant that has way less range but drops bombs. The bomber variant also has a Regiment of Renown that has armor sundering, which I have not used the bombs from the deck droppers too much. I'd be curious to see how much damage they actually do. But hey, another armor sundering ability can be potentially useful. And then we've got crabs with dudes on them. These crabs have zombies riding on the back that essentially have shotguns. They don't do the most missile damage in the world. It's basically just a little bit of extra, but just comparing a regular unit of crabs, it does give them a little bit of extra health, which I guess is nice. And the missile attack does. I mean, it's not like it does nothing, but you can't really direct them. It's sort of like the Ragnarok Queen, where they just sort of fire wherever they feel like. So that in and of itself is a little bit rough, but the Regiment of Renown variant, the Lamprey's Revenge, the Rotting Prometheans with gunnery mobs, these guys gain regeneration and expert charge defense, so even infantry charging in won't give their charge bonus. And of course, being a Regiment of Renown, they go all the way up to 63 melee defense. So yeah, crabs with 120 armor, 63 melee defense, expert charge defense, and regeneration. I mean, granted, they're pretty expensive at 1700, but these guys are a nightmare for Cav to deal with. And very often they'll be one of the last units alive for your Vampire Coast army because they're just super duper tanky. Moving on, we've got artillery. Mortar is essentially the Empire mortar, but it's a little bit better because it's crewed by zombies, which actually can be worse because it means your crew sometimes can't get away because they're so slow, and they'll crumble rather than routing, which actually for an artillery crew can be good and bad. But they also get extra powder, so at least while this is active, they'll do more damage than an Empire mortar, but they are less accurate and they're less expensive. Carronade, basically the same thing. It's an Empire Great Cannon, but all the same things that I just said about the mortar apply here. Big Bess is a unique unit, a huge cannon, kind of like a hell cannon, fires in an arc, does a massive amount of damage to unarmored units. I haven't really tried it too much against armored units. I've mostly only used it in campaign. I really haven't tried it in multiplayer because it's so expensive and it's such a big target. I really don't know that it would ever have a place in multiplayer. I don't know. We'll see if this has any place in competitive play, but again, another meme unit that maybe if you want your replay casted, if you can get a good Queen Bess replay, feel free to send it to me. So anyway, Necrofex Colossus. We've already talked a little bit about this guy with Noctilus's mount, but again, armor-piercing missile damage, only 75 armor and pretty decent health, not the most, but not the best combat stats either. Good weapon strength with armor-piercing damage. Yeah, long range. And it also can summon a unit of deckhand mobs when it goes below 50%. I guess it does it automatically. But yeah, I love that kind of abandoned ship mechanic where the zombies just sort of fall off. But decent monster, sort of in the same vein as like your Cygor or your Bone Giant. In my experience, can be very cost effective. It does have a Regiment of Renown version, which I have not used, I will admit. I have not got the chance to use this guy at all yet. But he's got better combat stats. He also gains flaming attacks in melee, so okay, I think this is something like a flamethrower. I might have to check this out later, but it doesn't do armor-piercing missile damage, but just does way more, and it looks like it also has shorter range. So yeah, essentially a flamer version. Also can't fire on the move, it looks like the regular one can, so it's only 200 more expensive, but I'd be curious. I mean, it does have this burnt leadership effect, so theoretically you could stack burnt with the Shade Wraith's Gunner's Discourage, plus maybe like a Doom and Darkness, just for maximum. I mean, that's going to be like minus 20-something leadership just with that alone or more. Plus you get the fear on there, and you could probably route these units without even having to fight them very much, at least for some of the lower leadership factions. But just a bit of theory crafting there. I actually haven't tried it. Again, haven't had the chance to use that Regiment of Renown at all. But yeah, Rotting Leviathan is one of the last monsters here. This is a giant single entity enemy crab. Unfortunately, no weak spot for massive damage, but does have 150 armor, pretty decent speed and combat stats. Not the most weapon strength for a monster of this price range, but this is more of a tank than anything. Expert charge defense. There are some zombies sitting on the back who do armor-piercing missile damage, which is pretty nice. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Not a whole lot else to say about the giant enemy crab. But yeah, last but not least, we've got the Terrorgeist. This Terrorgeist, again, does not have anti-large, but if we compare it to the Vampire Counts version just very briefly, you can see it is actually objectively better. in terms of its stats. Just has more weapon damage overall and more melee attack. I'd be curious to see what the bonus versus large is. 35. Oh, so that's pretty significant. But still, you know, a lot of similar attributes. It's got the breath attack, regeneration, good armor-piercing damage, charge bonus, good armor, gives you a lot of control presence in the sky, fear and terror, of course. So, you know, like a Harkon, double Terrorgeist build with him riding a Terrorgeist and a Deathshriek Terrorgeist can potentially be very powerful against certain factions. Just in general, I think the Vampire Coast is going to be one of the more powerful air factions. And in many matchups, it's going to benefit you. This is kind of transitioning already into tactics, but it's going to benefit you to try and win the air as much as possible. So let's just quickly take a look at a sample build here. Something like this. I may go in and fine-tune, actually, this a little bit here, depending on some different things. But generally, the idea is you want to try and win the skies to make your deck droppers safe, and then you can pretty much just fire in with impunity from the sky to the ground. And since these deck droppers do a ton of armor-piercing missile damage, you can just gun down high-value units while, you know, Harkon and the Deathshriek Terrorgeist are diving. The Vampire Fleet Captain can hold things down on the ground, you know, support the zombies, as well as Harkon and everything with magic. And yeah, something like this potentially extremely powerful, for example, against the Vampire Counts. If you can beat them in the air and then have the, you know, there's really nothing they can do to shoot at these deck droppers, so they can just sit up in the air and pick off like a Mortis Engine, for example, no problems. Very powerful flying faction. They are also a pretty powerful monster and missile faction, obviously. So the double Necrofex builds, you guys have probably been seeing me use these quite a bit recently. This is actually a build I used in the tournament today against Bretonnia. The crabs, you know, very good against heavy cavalry. The cannons, also very good against heavy cavalry. And the Necrofex in general against certain factions, you know, Norska, Bretonnia, any faction which isn't going to be able to shoot back super effectively, the Necrofex is going to be pretty good against. Against factions that can shoot back, might be a little bit of a big target, but, you know, the gun line builds definitely can be pretty powerful. Like, I ran a build that was something similar to this, but it had basically just zombie handguns. So yeah, something like this, and then I think I had maybe, was it Lamprey's Revenge and something else, I don't remember exactly, but you know, something like this can be pretty effective. Let's see, Celostra can definitely be pretty effective as well. If you want to go for a mobility build and kind of be a little bit unexpected, you can always grab Celostra, grab like some Hounds. Tokshin used a similar build to this. Very good effects against me today. Let's see, what else did he have? I think he maybe had some other stuff, but this was generally the core of his army. He had Celostra, and I'm not sure exactly what spells he was rocking, but probably Denizens of the Deep, maybe Fog of the Damned, I'm not 100% sure. But at the very least, Denizens of the Deep and maybe Spiteful Shot as well. I'd probably take these two just because Celostra's going to be up fighting more often, and trying to summon those knights on your opponent. We'll grab that as well. Let's see, and then again, I can't remember exactly what he had, but probably a couple units of crabs. And let's see, we'll just grab more zombies as well. And yeah, something like this can be a little bit surprising because, again, people don't really plan for mobility, and so you can get these Ghosts of the Past to really do some good damage. Oh yeah, that's right, he had some Sirens. That's what I'm missing here. We could potentially grab a couple units of Sirens here just for that attack debuff. This is going to be pretty risky if you're going up against a faction that has good magic damage, but the Sirens, if your opponent for whatever reason doesn't bring magic damage, they will be very, very effective. So yeah, just kind of spitballing a little bit here, guys, but yeah, so that's pretty much it in terms of the roster. I've already talked a little bit about tactics. In terms of fighting against the Vampire Coast, going super wide with a lot of shielded infantry is really the way to go. Your infantry, by and large, are going to be better than the zombies, typically, and you can usually, even with low-tier troops, as long as they don't get leadership bombed, they can contest pretty effectively against the zombies. So, you know, I've already kind of shared a couple builds, but something like that Chaos build I showed, you know, Tomb Kings, that I showed a build there as well. But, like, let's say that we're going to apply that paradigm to, just for example, Britonia. I have one game in this matchup that I'm going to be showing, and came up with some interesting conclusions here, but Lewin Leon Kurt honestly might not be bad here because of that magic and missile resistance with the Lion Shield. You're just going to have to be super careful at putting him into harm's way. I'll cut Beloved Son of Britonia as I usually do, and we'll pick up the Sword of Couronne. Let's see, if we are going to go with a super wide infantry army, which is what I would generally recommend doing here, you're going to want to grab lots of shielded infantry. We're going to want a couple Grail Relics probably to help protect leadership. We're going to grab some halberds as well. Let's see here. And this is a huge army. We're lacking a caster and some good mobility, but yeah, I don't know that we necessarily need to heal here, so maybe I would take a Lore of Heaven's Damsel just to throw down some really powerful buffs and debuffs, like Wind Blast, Harmonic Convergence, Curse the Midnight Wind. If you really wanted to have some fun, you could even throw down like a Chain Lightning in the backline, but again, just applying, some of that wide shielded infantry philosophy to this matchup as well. I might fine-tune this down a little bit to try and bring at least a couple units of cavalry to protect backline and so on, or maybe some peasant archers or something like that, but again, just kind of spitballing here. I really haven't dove into it too much yet, but at this point, I'm going to kind of open things up to you guys a little bit here. I haven't really been paying attention to chat this whole time, I'm not going to lie, so let me just quickly scan through things here, and as you guys start to have questions, yeah, go ahead and start putting them in the chat. Let's see here. Can you conquer Count Noctilus's home territory? I believe so. I think someone said they lost a campaign as Noctilus, which if that's possible, that means they have to at least be able to raise your capital, even if they can't conquer it. But let's see here. New Lord of the Dark Elves. I actually don't have in my build access to Lokir Felheart. You can see I only have Hargoneth Dark Elves and Cult of Pleasure currently, so I'd love to show you guys, but unfortunately I don't have him. I think the only people who have access to him are the people who are in the Everchosen, so if I can get a battle with one of them where they use him, I'll show it to you guys and maybe we can analyze him there. But let's see here. Alariel. Yeah, we can take a look at Alariel. Let's see here. Lizards. Against the Dawi for the Vampire Coast, maybe Aranessa, honestly, on the Crab. Because she's not going to be a huge target, or even on foot, just because she has good melee defense. She has a huge splash attack that would do a ton of damage to infantry. But yeah, let's quickly go over to the High Elves here and have a look. One thing I will note that you guys may or may not have seen already, Tyrion got armor piercing in melee, primarily armor piercing. Before he was primarily non-AP. But with him having, 95 speed and insanely good combat stats, even without martial prowess, not to mention feint and riposte, and some really good items as well, Tyrion is now one of the scariest combat characters in the game. Just keep that in mind. Alariel, let's see here. I'm not 100% sure without really diving into it what all has been changed here. It looks relatively similar. Looks like her melee defense on the Eagle has been lowered. I believe it used to be a lot higher, but it looks like it might be lower now. I could be wrong about that, but let's see. Her Earthblood, at least on the menu, it says it costs 6 Winds of Magic, and it used to be if you brought this item here, the Stave of Averlorn, it would go down to 4. I'm not sure if that's been changed yet, but oh, interesting. Shield of Thorns is no longer missile resistance, it's now actual physical resistance, so maybe that spell would be more useful, certainly. New Vamp Lords. Yeah, we can definitely take a look at that. I have not showed them off yet, so let's actually go straight to that. Yeah, so the new Vampire Count Bloodline Lords, starting with the cheapest, and in my opinion, arguably the worst. All of these guys have access to the standard mount options, Barded Nightmare, Hellsteed, and Zombie Dragon. The Neckarch Lord, so all of them have a unique ability. This guy's got access to a mix of 3 lores, Vampire, Death, and Beast, so he has the lore attributes for all 3. He's got the Hunger to regenerate melee, of course, of course, Undeath Resurgent, and his is this Dark Protection, which gives a single target damage resistance and melee defense, which is decent. His spell selection, he's got Spirit Leech, Purple Sun, Invocation of Nehek, Raise Dead, Pan's Pelt, and Curse of Honor Hair. Kind of a weird-ish spell selection. I mean, he would definitely work. Almost any Vampire Lord can work, just because Vampire Lords, as long as they have Invocation of Nehek, basically, you can kind of make them work. Looks like he's got Forbidden Rod and Earthing Rod, so he's going to be really kind of more of a casting-focused character, but whereas you have like Manfred and some others, I really just don't see this guy being that popular. The Von Karstein Lord, on the other hand, I can see being very popular. He, again, has a mix of beasts and death, but his spells, in my opinion, are a lot better. He's got all of the best spells from Lore of Vampires: Invocation of Nehek, Dance Macabre, and Raise Dead, which is the 3 that I typically will take. Wind of Death is also really fun, and Risk Reward can be fun to take as well. Flock of Doom is a great cheap little damage spell. Yeah, I'd imagine that you'd more often want to be putting your Winds of Magic into healing, but Flock of Doom is not that expensive, and if you're fighting in a big blob, you can definitely do some good damage. But probably my favorite is a unique version of Transformation of Kadan, rather than summoning a useless, horrible, terrible Manticore, which, by the way, we'll take a look at Manticores in just a minute. It summons a Vargulf, which is really good because Vargulfs have regeneration, which means that it counteracts their summoned degeneration, and Vargulfs are also just generally a pretty underrated monster. They have good armor-piercing damage, decent combat stats. I think they have missile resistance. I guess we could always look here at an actual Vargulf. No, they actually don't have any missile resistance, but yeah, decent combat stats, decent weapon strength. The regeneration means that they will stick around due to their degeneration, more so than another summoned unit would. And I have used this once, pretty effective. He's got Charm Shield, Sword of Anti-Heroes, nothing crazy there, but this other ability here, the Storm of Night, is basically like Tempest, but it's interesting. It says it's good against flying here in this tooltip, but you actually can't use it on flying units. You can only use it on ground units, so I'm not sure if that's a bug or if that's intentional or what exactly is the deal there with that particular ability. But moving on, we've got the Lamian Vampire Lord, or Lady, I guess. Same mount options once again, and Curse of Undeath, Hunger. Lightning Reflexes is a self-buff, 24% speed and 22% damage resistance, making her a bit tankier. She's also got Seduction. This is 40-meter range, 41 second. That's a pretty long time. Debuff for 26 melee attack and 24% speed. Not bad at all. Come to my cabin. You'll find it most comfortable, I'm sure. Oh, that's great. Crown of Command and Scepter of Stability for her 2 items. In terms of her spells, she's got a mix of shadows and vampires. Invocation, Raise Dead, Wind of Death, good stuff. Enfeebling Foe, ooh, that's nasty. Invocation of Nehek and Enfeebling Foe, plus Penumbral Pendulum. Yeah, that's a really good spell selection. Occam's Mind Razor, too. That's an excellent spell selection for her. So maybe you might see some Lamians occasionally. The Blood Dragon. All of these guys have more or less the same combat stats as your typical Vampire Lord. Looks like the Lamian doesn't actually have a shield, but the Blood Dragon has anti-infantry and massive melee attack. Not the best melee defense, but I think he's dual-wielding swords, if I'm not mistaken. But his abilities here, he's got Hunger, Lore of Vampires, Honor of Death. So in melee, he gets a constant 11% damage resistance and 8 leadership, which is pretty significant. That constant damage resistance in particular makes him pretty hard to kill. Undeath Resurgent, and he's also got Heart Piercing. So this is a self buff, gives him Armor Sundering. Interesting. I think that's the only Armor Sundering ability besides like proper spells that the vampire counts have access to. That's very interesting. 40% weapon damage and 36% charge bonus. Armor piercing damage. That's a nasty, nasty buff there. So that makes him super scary. Not to mention he's got one of the best items in the game, Helm of Discord. 25 second area of effect, 27 melee attack, 26 melee attack, 27 melee defense. Very good stuff. Sword of Anti-Heroes once again. I do think that you'll occasionally see some Blood Dragons. Their abilities are pretty powerful. Strigoi is just insane. in terms of his stats here, you can see he's got crazy good combat stats and huge armor piercing damage, even just on foot. Now, granted, he doesn't have any armor, but yeah, that pretty good health pool as well. You put him up on the Terrorgeist, his combat stats do go down, although they're still really good. He's got bonus versus large of 35. So let's just for fun here switch these guys also over to the counts and get a regular Strigoi and just compare them 1-to-1. So yeah, you can see the Strigoi Vampire Lord, rather than the Ghoul King, is just better across the board. And he's also got some different abilities as well. So he's got this one here, Ghoul King of Ushoran, so it gives himself regeneration, extra regeneration, as if the regen you already had wasn't enough. And 40% armor piercing damage on himself as well. Pretty decent. Last 34 seconds. Those abilities don't totally blow me away. His spell selection, I believe, yep, basically the same as the Strigoi Ghoul King. So basically, the Strigoi Lord, his benefit is that he just has better stats than the Ghoul King. He is pretty expensive, though. And you don't have access to some of the spells that I really like personally, so I probably wouldn't use him too much, but I could definitely see him being useful in some matchups. So, yeah, let's see here. Vampire Count's getting some missile units. They are only for campaign, I believe. I don't think they're... Yeah, I don't think they're in multiplayer at all. So, yep, I'm not really going to talk about them too much. Maybe when I do Vampire Counts campaign, I'll touch on them. But, yeah. Yep. Oh, it looks like people were already answering that in chat. Vampire crabs beat green skin spiders. Yes, absolutely. Poor Master Necromancer. Hey, Master Necromancer's still dirt cheap. And, I mean, all these new Vampire Lords are super expensive. So, like, you can take a Master Necromancer up in the air with a good spell loadout for super cheap. Like, 1,200 points compared to, like, 3,000 plus for some of these new Lords. So, that's the main benefit to the Necro. But, yep. Dwarves got Reforging. We could take a look at the Dwarves. I don't think they've got any changes. What other changes can I remember? Oh, yeah, Wood Elves. Orion, I don't know if he got any changes. I do know that Ancient Treemen now have armor piercing, which I'm super happy about. They have 280 AP with 120 regular weapon damage. That also goes for the regular Treemen as well. They also have primarily armor piercing, whereas before that was not the case. So look for more potential Treeman builds in certain matchups from me, just because now that the Treemen themselves are a lot better, I think that build could be more viable. But Blood Dragon has Frenzy. Oh yeah, I did miss that. Good catch. Makes sense. Favorite new unit. My favorite new unit from the Vampire Coast has to be the Regiment of Renown handgunners that have bayonets. I just think that's so cool. Oh man, as somebody who's played a lot of like Empire Total War, for example, where through your tech tree you research like better and better bayonets, and your regular musket infantry get better and better into combat, where eventually when you get like socket bayonets, they can fend off cavalry without really too much issue. I always really liked that, and so to me, to have like a bayonet, you know, really good hybrid dual role unit, even if they are kind of expensive, I think they're super cool. So that's probably my favorite unit. As boring as it is the zombie Regiment of Renown zombie handgunners. These guys, the Black Spot. Where are they? Right here. Yep, that's probably my favorite new unit. Steam tanks. I don't think steam tanks really got too many changes. Yeah, still only 10 melee defense. I think that maybe their weapon strength went up to 200, I think, because it was 180 before, right? So maybe their weapon strength went up slightly. Maybe their melee attack went up slightly. But it looks like they still, yeah. Why do trees need AP? Because if a tree falls on your house, it will destroy your house. I think that counts as armor piercing. Can crabs push through battle lines? Kind of. They're a little bit slower, but they have a huge amount of mass. I mean, like if you guys watch my chicken and crabs game, you will have seen the Silostra just throwing Big Bird around like he was a rag doll. So, yep. Yep. What other changes? I'm trying to think. Empire, I don't think really got too much by the way of changes. I don't think so. I think everything is pretty much the same. Maybe the captain got a little bit cheaper. I'm not really sure. But let's see. High Elves, I already touched on some of the changes for them. I really don't know beyond that. It does look like the Fireborn got a bit cheaper, which is nice. Let's see. Lizardmen. So the Lizardmen change, I really haven't got to play around with this too much yet, so I really can't speak to it. But basically the change is that the Rampage is, from what I understand now, on all of the Cold One units, and just generally it it's on like the Croc. I guess it was always on the Croc scores, but Cold-Blooded now is different. Instead of it stops Rampage basically. Instead of healing, it will just stop your unit from rampaging. It has 4 uses rather than just 1. So I think that was kind of always their intention, was to have Cold-Blooded prevent your units from rampaging. So now, if you take, especially if you have all 3 character slots, you can have up to 3 of your units not rampaging at a time, that otherwise would be rampaging in that situation. So units like Horned Ones, especially Crocs, Gores, some of the more expensive units that would rampage might be more useful now that you can actually control that, potentially. Bears looking at, but let's see here. With new Pegasus Knights, worth bringing. I tried them against the Lizardmen, which was probably one of the worst matchups to bring them in before, and it's still not great. I haven't really tried them in too many other matchups, but it does seem like they're better. The Royal Hippogriff Knights definitely seem better. I mean, they were already pretty decent before, but it does seem like flying units just generally across the board work a little bit better. Like they can engage and disengage a little bit more effectively, especially against infantry. But let's see. Ancient tree man totaled my car. Oh, I feel bad now. Hellman's campaign. Plus 12 charge bonus on the corpse cart. Yeah, we can maybe go look at that in a minute. No, the hunger does not give weakness to flame, but it is melee conditional. So the target, the person who has the ability has to be in melee to be able to regen. So, yep. Welcome. We've just been reviewing the roster, and now everyone's fielding questions. Feel free to ask me, anything about any major changes to the Skaven. I haven't really seen any major changes to the Skaven. I don't really expect them to get really too much changes until they get their DLC. But yeah. Greenskin, same thing. I really don't think that they've had too many changes. I'm still pushing for Watt to be a non-melee conditional recharge, but Grimgore did get some mass increases and some other buffs. I guess we can look at him briefly. Is that a new icon for Azag, or has that always been his icon? Interesting. But yeah, I guess they buffed Grimgore a little bit, but he's still, I mean, until he gets like some new actual abilities, he's really just not going to be super useful. Let's see, Azag looks basically the same. Goblin Great Shaman, I really want an Arachnarok Queen mount, especially with like Silostra now having the giant enemy crab mount. I really want the Goblin Great Shaman to have an Arachnarok for a mount. I need it. I need it in my life. Bretonnian Artillery looks cheaper. Yeah, they did make the trebuchets slightly cheaper. I did notice that. I don't know how much it will actually help, but it's something. Foot Squires got slightly more expensive. They're not all the way back up to 700, but they're now 675 rather than 650, which is probably a pretty warranted change. I think 650 was a hairline too cheap for them. Let's see. Norska Mammoths, from my understanding, got a lot better. I haven't had the chance to really use them yet, but I believe Giants, oh yeah, Giants also got better, so this applies to a number of different factions, but up to 600 total weapon strength, which is just insane. That's, I believe, the highest weapon strength of any unit in the game, baseline. Manticore's got a price drop. Oh yeah, they went from 900 to 800. They still are useless, though, because they don't have armor piercing and they rampage, so... Yep, Manticore is still useless, unfortunately. Until they get... I just, again, these monstrous units that don't have AP, like I get the Great Eagle not having AP maybe, although I would say that a beak of that size would probably realistically be able to pierce through plate armor, no problem. But the Manticore, I think, really needs AP, especially because it has Rampage, like, more so than the Eagle, I would say it needs AP. But yeah, Mammoths, I think, got a little bit better. Giants got a little bit better. I don't know about Frostworms, but hopefully they won't be so dependent on Famir. And Famir also got slightly more expensive as well, which, again, probably warranted. But let's see here. Dark Shards shields have bronze instead of silver. I don't know. That's a good question. Nope, they still have silver shields. They have, like, Pavis crossbows, kind of, so it makes sense why they would have the higher missile block chance. Let's see here. Warlord on Bonebreaker. I think it's basically the same. Yeah, it looks to be basically the same as it was before. Still no terror, which, I mean, I get, but at the same time, it's not the best. Yeah, give them poison. That would be good. I would be up for that. Good point, Steven. Good point. Can the Necrofex do good in melee? The Necrofex really isn't as good in melee as I would say the Cygor is. It's probably maybe even less good in melee than the Bone Giant. Like, if I had to rank those three in terms of melee performance, it would probably be Cygor's the best, then the Bone Giant, then the Necrofex. Although, if Noctilus is on it, it makes a difference because it makes it have better combat stats and it has more health and can heal itself and everything. So, a regular Necrofex, not that great. Noctilus, still pretty scary. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully all have been enjoying. Let's see here. Crabs with gunners on them. I mean, the Regiment of Renown one, I would say, is going to be useful in a lot of matchups just because they have such good melee defense and regeneration. It's kind of like the Butchers of Kalkengard, although without terror, but with way more armor and charge defense. Yeah, I think they're going to be a pretty good staple in most matchups. I mean, because you can't really control where the guns are shooting, it doesn't make that much of a difference to me. It's just more expensive crabs with slightly more health. But Queen Bess, I don't think you're going to see much in melee. It's in multiplayer. Super fun unit to use in campaign, especially if you're fighting like the High Elves, who tend to bring a lot of light armor archers that have very long range that can potentially be super dangerous to you. But Queen Bess just annihilates them, and it's super fun. But I don't think that you'll be seeing them a lot in campaign, or sorry, in multiplayer. Which lords do you see being used? Noctilus and Harkon, I think, are going to be your most used. Silostra and Arnessa will both be used as well. It remains to be seen as to what matchups they're really going to be ideal in, but definitely I think you'll see Silostra as kind of, and Arnessa both as kind of counter meta picks. Like, if you want to take someone by surprise, you maybe take one of those two and take a kind of an unorthodox build. But I do think that Harkon and Noctilus are going to be your go-tos in most matchups. Harkon, just because he shuts down casters so hard, and he's also just a super powerful character in and of himself. Same thing with Noctilus, super powerful character, and he can help control the pace of the battlefield super well, and just generally does a lot of damage and has some really good abilities. So yeah, Archaon changes. Oh, did Archaon get some changes? We can go look at that. Oh yeah, Archaon got the Tyrion treatment, so he's got amazing combat stats now too, and armor piercing. So, ooh man, and he's faster too. He's up to 78 speed. I think before he was maybe like in the 60s. I could be wrong, but woo, wow, yeah. Archaon suddenly just became mega scary. 330 AP, woo, buddy. So that means. Let's just. I'm just curious about something. I want to try something real quick. So we're gonna grab Tyrion here, and we're gonna make him fight because that's what we do, right? And we're gonna bring some spells. Probably not all the spells, just a couple of the spells that I would typically take here. And yeah, I just want to see what happens. Archaon looks super scary now, so. It might finally be the Ever-Chosen. Yeah, if he can finally dethrone Big Bird. Big Bird has been the best lord, in my opinion. Kolek's still pretty good in some matchups, although from what I understand, he might have got some nerfs. Oh, did I forget to put him on Dorgar? Oh, no, he's on Dorgar. Okay. Okay, Archaon, let's go up the hill. Find Tyrion. He's being a hill camper. Tyrion, where did you go? Dang it, I'm trying to do some testing. Did you run out into the low ground, Tyrion? Oh, is he coming around this way? Okay, fine. Somebody play the Benny Hill music for me. Kolek, I heard got some nerfs. I don't know exactly, but... Okay, this is not working. We're going to go to a different map. Yeah, Tyrion just ran away. Let's go somewhere where he can't hide, like MP Crossroads, or even better, Glacial Lake. By the way, the new map UI yeah, the map UI got updated for selecting a map here, and I'm sure some of you saw, if you watched the tournament today, the spectator mode that Turin was using. Right, typical elf. Kazrak we can look at. Try me in. Glacial Lake, you start out like right next to each other though, so. Alright, so we want to do this. And that. And then this. And now Archaon has 870 weapon strength, and he's up to 87 melee defense, 594 AP. Pop this, he goes up to 114 melee defense, and he is smashing Tyrion's teeth in. Woo, buddy. I mean, granted, Tyrion does have the Heart of Averlorn, so he potentially could regenerate some health here. And now that all the buffs are off, Tyrion, he still has worse stats. And we've still got some buffs active here, so... Man, that Slayer of Kings lasts a long time. Holy cow. Oh, yeah. Tyrion might just rout before he gets the Heart of Averlorn. Yep, routed before he got the Heart of Averlorn. Oh, man. I mean, I've seen Tyrion kick the crap out of some people, so that just means that Archaon is insane. Whew. Wow. All right. Noted. Archaon is a monster now. Proper monster, like he should be. Can I be Archaon? Queek, just for you, buddy. I want to see how fast Queek gets domed. We'll give him his stuff. But, I mean, just the cost differential here, I think, is going to tell you what should happen. But, yeah, Archaon finally the Ever-Chosen. The Vampire Counts, yeah, a lot of the Vampire Counts units have the Hunger, like pretty much all of their lords and heroes do, I think, so. Alright, Queek. See how this goes. It's not going well for you, Queek. I mean, you've got maybe a hit in on him, and you're at half health already. Oh, this is just sad. Queek needs the same mass buff treatment, I think, that Grimgor and some of the others got, because he is just getting consistently knocked over by Archaon here. Just can't even get a hit in. And this is the biggest issue with Queek, or one of his biggest issues, I should say. He kind of suffers from that Grimgor syndrome a little bit. Oh, didn't go flying that time. Oh, he's got Dwarf Gouger up. Got a hit on Archaon there. Oh. Oh. Versus Ancient Tree Man. I think Archaon would kick the crap out of the Ancient Tree Man. I'm pretty sure Archaon's going to kick the crap out of most people. Let's move it up a tier. Let's go with a heavy hitter. Krokar on Grimlock. With Hand of the Gods. Here we go. Let's try this. Queek has left the chat. Durthu? Yeah, Durthu's another world beater. We'll try out Durthu next. Although I think with the fire damage, Archaon will just shred Durthu. But Khazrak. Oh yeah, I totally forgot I was going to check out Khazrak. After this. This is important for science. Oh, Hand of the Gods. Ooh, that did some good damage. Pop the buffs. And Archaon's taking some damage. Now we've got everything up, and he's taking some hits, but he's able to put some good damage on. Oh man, is he gonna beat Krokar? Oh man, I don't know. I think Krokar's got him. And keep in mind too that Krokar can heal and Archaon cannot, so like a Rev Crystal would absolutely change this. But S is considering this is directly a target that you should not be going up against. Archaon doesn't have he has Lore of Fire. He doesn't have magic. He doesn't have fire damage baseline, but I mean, since I'm bringing Flaming Sword here, ooh, one more quick spell. This is going to be super close. Holy cow. Oh man. Oh man. That Cascading Fire Cloak at the end basically just saved his life. But, oh, I mean, previously Archaon would have got his teeth kicked in right there. So that is mighty impressive. Yeah, apparently it is a target you should be going up against, I guess. Let's have a look at Khazrak real quick. Nope, still non-AP. Still kind of garbage on foot. And not that great on the chariot. I mean, he does have a 100 charge bonus, but got Vanguard. Yeah. Yeah, poor Khazrak. Looks like he still sucks. But yeah, I know you guys. Ungrim, Archaon versus Kolek. Kolek nerfs. Let's have a look at Kolek. I don't know. I don't know what nerfs he got. I'd have to go back and compare it to the previous build, but Archaon though is where it's at right now. Let's grab this again. And let's go up against who is another really good combat character. I guess we could try out some of the dwarf characters maybe. Like let's do Ungrim with all of his stuff. Lokir on a dragon. Unfortunately, I don't have access to Lokir. Otherwise, I would be down to test that, but Karl Franz. Yeah. For that one, I might need a human, though, because he'd have to be up on Deathclaw. But let's see how this goes. Looks like Ungrim popped everything too, so he's up to 888 weapon strength as well, but he can't get a hit on Archaon. His melee defense is too low. And Archaon's got 100 and something melee defense right now, so even with all that extra melee attack, it didn't do enough. Oh, there's a hit though. That was a hit. I think Archaon's got this no problem. I don't know. Ungrim's kind of bringing this back a little bit. Ooh, man, that was a nasty hit. That Red Ruin just lasts so long. Holy crap. I don't know. Ungrim might take this all the way back here. Ooh, another nasty hit. Better pop Cascading Fire Cloak. Oh, he's dead. That was super close. That was closer than I was expecting. All those buffs on Ungrim. Holy cow. But yeah, Archaon now is one of the top tier combat characters in the game. With the faction that already had one of the top tier combat characters in the game. I think we need to do Kolek against Archaon. I think that's we really got to have the heavyweight title match for the Crown of Chaos, right? For the World Beater title for the Warriors. I think there's really only one way to settle this. It would help if I had Slayer of Kings. I didn't have Slayer of Kings on that last one. That makes a big difference. Oh, Queek. I'll try and help you out as much as I can, bud. You got a good stagger there. This is the thing about Kolek, is he can stagger lock you, but oh, one hit by Archaon just took out like a quarter of Kolek's health there. So yeah, Archaon's having issues with stagger, but when he gets a hit in, it does a lot of damage. But yeah, this is the issue with Kolek, is you just get stagger locked. He just pushes you back constantly. We'll see. Archaon's getting some swings in still. Oh, did I forget Star Crusher? Oops. I think Kolek might be able to take this. It's hard to say, but keeping in mind as well that Archaon is your caster and your lord in one, so you wouldn't have to bring a caster separate from Kolek, which is a benefit in and of itself. But that does also mean you're limited to Lore of Fire, which, I mean, Lore of Fire is definitely good, but this is super close. I think we got him. Oh, but that last swing. Oh, man. Oh, and they both rout. I'm going to call that a wash. That's a draw if I've ever seen one. Yeah, the thing about Archaon, though, is he has a way smaller hitbox. Like, he's not going to get shot up to pieces. Yeah, you know, I feel like getting hit by a Warhammer that size probably should stagger you. I think that's probably fair. No Star Crusher, and it's a draw. Yeah, with Star Crusher, he probably would have won that, but yeah, that's impressive. Archaon is up there now on that tier of world beaters, I would say. So yeah, he has a shield too. That's true. And I mean, on the horse, he's got 35% missile block chance, which is definitely nice. He's got some physical resistance as well. 120 armor. Doesn't have as much health as Kolek, about 1,000 less HP. But Kolek not looking so hot anymore compared to the Everchosen. Fanchantress on foot. Oh man. -5 armor, 100 gold price increase. Okay. Yeah, if any of you guys want to pull up your build right now and like watch the stream on the side and compare 1-to-1, that's fine with me. You guys can let me know if you spot anything that I don't see. But yeah, Archaon's gonna be making a comeback. I'm a huge fan of that change. Dark Elves I don't think got too much. Malekith. Let's see. Oh, Gaze of Malice only has 3 charges now instead of 4. That's good. All this stuff looks basically the same. Was Soul Sealer always 18? Maybe that's a little bit more expensive. Destroyer is a plus 15 ability recharge. I think it used to be plus 45 or something. It used to be a lot more, but that's good. Yep. Hydra has had some cost changes. Well, how about that? Looks like you're right. 1650. 200 for the Chill Centaur. Or sorry, 2000. Yeah, I wish I could showcase Loki here, but unfortunately I did not get access to him. So again, I'll have to if I can convince like Turin or Indie Pride or even I guess Jen on occasion probably has access to him. One of those guys that has Lokir, if I can get one of them to play me in a battle where they take Lokir against me, then I can show him off. But I can't access him unfortunately myself at the moment. Of course, he'll be free for everyone when the patch comes out, but. Let's see. I think that's pretty much it. Tomb Kings look pretty much the same. Oh yeah, Kemmler's got his own faction now. There's that, the Barrow Legion. Yeah, any other questions? Yeah, Clay Aesthetics, I plan on it, especially with like Fallout 76 and with Total War Warhammer as well. I plan on streaming a lot more often. My schedule's starting to open up a little bit. I've been super duper busy with my day job for the past like 3 or 4 months. Frog Vapor, in terms of this DLC, I'm not really sure. I haven't played them all yet, so let me get back to you on that. Just in terms of Total War in general, Age of Charlemagne was really good. Fall of the Samurai was probably the best campaign they've ever made. In terms of the worst, I don't know. I don't think I've ever finished a grand campaign of Attila, so maybe that one's the worst. But in just Warhammer, the Wood Elves are really weird right now. Like, they just don't really make sense in terms of their play styles. So that one, I would say, might be the worst. The best, I'm not sure. Really not sure. I personally like the Hordes a lot, like the Beastmen and Chaos both. Like I played a Chaos campaign on my own time in Mortal Empires where I went. This was just after Queen and the Crone. I went and got the Sword of Cain with Archaon. I took it from, I think Alariel had taken it. I took it from her, and that was hilarious. I mean, you want to talk about broken? Archaon now looks strong. I could only imagine what he would look like now with the Sword of Cain. He'd be even stronger, but, I mean, he was hilariously broken in that campaign. Just absolutely, absolutely broken. So, maybe Chaos? Maybe? But, yep. Yeah, Wood Elves are awesome in multiplayer, and I love them as a faction. It's just their campaign was designed in a different time when regional occupation was still a thing, and like it hasn't really aged super well. I will say, Halo, that that the chicken is still going to be probably better in some matchups. Like against the Vampire Coast, for example, or any of the really heavy missile factions. I think still Archaon's going to be... He might be a viable pick in more of them, but I still think that Big Bird, especially against the heavy missile factions, is going to be the way to go. But I do think that Archaon's going to be a lot more viable in a lot more matchups, which is awesome. Now is the time for Sigvald. I don't think Siggy Boy got any changes. He's just cheap and doesn't die very easy. That's the main thing about him, but did he get cheaper? He might have got cheaper, but anyway. Yeah, they'll get back to fixing What Else campaign. I mean, since they've updated now the Dwarves and the Vampire counts, I'm assuming they're going to do all the base races for Game 1, like update them first. So I would assume, I don't know for sure, but I would assume Empire or Greenskins next. Personally, I would prefer the Greenskins. I think they need a lot more help than the Empire does right now. So that would be... The next DLC is most likely going to be Skaven versus Lizardmen, Regiments of Renown and Lords. So maybe alongside that, because the Skaven are kind of involved with the Greenskins and the whole 8 Peaks thing, maybe we'll see an update to the Greenskins alongside them. Or else we'll see the Empire alongside them and Greenskins with whatever comes after. And then, I don't know, with Beastmen, Norska, and Wood Elves, when they're... Or Bretonnia, too, I guess, would need, if they're going to do the same treatment, an update. As for those 4, I'm not really sure when those factions will get updates, but like Norska and the Wood Elves, for example, could use more Legendary Lords. And just... Well, Norska needs more generic lords too, but like Beastmen could use another legendary lord, Bretonnia could use another legendary lord, just to bring them all up to 4, since that's kind of the baseline that they're going with now. Like Vampire Coast, for example, has 4, and so it'd be cool to see them bring the other DLC factions from Game 1 up to that same level, but I don't know why it blocked that message, but okay. Blood Dragon on Dragon combat stats. That's a good question. Let's take a look. Vampire counts. Let's grab the Blood Dragon on a dragon. This is going to be hilariously expensive. If you kit him out with everything, he's almost 4,000 points. But he does have 44 and 44. That doesn't seem that good. Maybe it is for a dragon. What does the Red Duke have on a dragon? 48 and 44. Okay, so he's slightly better. The Strigoi, 37, 45. Manfred, 46, 46. Okay, so even Manfred is slightly better up on the dragon. That's a little strange. 520 AP. Yep, same weapon strength. Interesting. A Famir Lord would be awesome. Yeah, I would love a generic Famir caster Lord, because the Norskins don't have any Lord level casters, which I think kind of sucks. So I would love a Famir like Lord level caster. I think that'd be super cool. Give them the same spell selections that the Famir Balefiends have. Like you give them Shadows, Fire. I guess just Shadows and Fire is the 2 that they have access to. So yeah. Yeah, he does have Frenzy, I guess, so it is slightly better. I guess I wasn't taking that into account, but the charge bonus of the Frenzy, I think, would actually be the most useful part of that up on the dragon. Like, if we go ahead and look again, because, I mean, he's got only a 40 charge bonus. That actually isn't as high as I thought it was. But, yeah, with that Frenzy, it gives you a little bit of extra charge. So, yeah, that's something. Yeah, see you, Wicked. I am probably going to call it a night as well. I've been, you know, talking about Vampire Coast and the patch and everything for a good hour and a half now, so hopefully you guys found this interesting and informative. This stream will be uploaded after the fact. I'm automatically archiving it, and I'm going to be slapping it up as soon as it finishes processing, probably in another about hour, maybe 2 hours. So yeah, feel free to share this with your friends. You know, you fellow Total War Warhammer players that you know of might find this interesting and informative. Feel free to share it around. You guys' support means the world to me. Again, thank you so much. Just passed 5,000 subscribers, and I wouldn't be here without you guys. So thank you so much, and yeah, thanks all for coming out. We'll see you next time.